Well, we might wait another minute. It's just 1:30. I think
Okay.
people are still coming on.
Yeah.
Like Adele. Yeah.
I guess I'm just a little too excited.
Oh, well, birds are exciting.
They are.
They're very interesting. I think I really. Hey, Patricia,
Hi.
you see Roy, you see Rita,
Oh, hi, Pat.
a few people you know.
This is great.
Yeah.
No, it's okay, I'm fine. I'm good. Squeeze them into. Yeah.
You don't have to squeeze them. Enough like can't hear anybody.
Oh, looks like we've got about 40 people now.
Good.
That's a little over half.
Oh.
All right, Judy, whenever you are ready, I can.
Well, we can start.
As long as you're ready for it. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here today. We're so excited to be hosting this presentation with Judy Kramer. Like I mentioned earlier, we'll be meeting you during the presentation. Use the chat to ask any questions and comments, and we'll open the floor to any questions after the presentation as well. So our presenter today, Judy Kramer, is a nature photographer based in Palo Alto. She is a former president of the Palo Alto Camera Club and a member of the Cooperative Art Gallery House on California Avenue in Palo Alto. Her images are used by such organizations as North America Nature Photography Association, the California Native Plant Society, and Peninsula Open Space Trust. She began her bird photography during the pandemic when she was unable to travel. Thank you so much, Judy. I will let you have the floor.
Great, thank you very much. Thanks everybody for coming. I know that you're here because you enjoy birds as much as I do. I'm going to share my screen. So here we go.
I have to call you back. I have to call you
And
back.
let's see. Kay, I think you were going to mute everybody. Okay, so and when I'm running my program, so not me, yeah, right, I'm not muted. When I'm running the program, I won't be able to see you, so we decided to delay. You're welcome to write in the chat, and then we'll see if we can answer all your questions afterwards. So I'm going to open up my program. So everybody should be seeing Every Bird Has a Story with this nice turn coming toward us. So as Kat said, well, I've been a nature photographer for a while, but I really started getting particularly interested in birds during the pandemic because once the flowers died in June, as they do, and once the native flowers pretty much die in June, I had to find something else to photograph. So my husband and I started going out near the Baylands, and I discovered that birds are very interesting. So I'm going to go through some resources. I'm going to tell 12 bird stories. And then show, I think it's a 4.5-minute slideshow with birds and music and the Ken Burns effect. So I hope you will enjoy it all. So we are so fortunate. We have so many places to see birds around the bay and into the woods and up in the hills. So we've traveled basically from San Mateo and Hayward south to all these places and probably more, probably as far south as Morgan Hill. So different times of year, there are different birds to see. And so, as I said, we are very fortunate to have so many places. Since I live in Palo Alto, I most often go out to the Baylands. So starting on the far right with Shoreline Lake and around Mountain View Slough, and you can walk all the way from Shoreline Lake to the Santa Clara County San Mateo line. You can walk in an unbroken line, Charleston Slough over to the Palo Alto Baylands. And then in addition, Emily Renzel Wetlands is on East Bay Shore Road between San Antonio and Page Mill. And it's a wonderful place, easy to get to, easy to park, and a wonderful place. So all these are good places to see water birds. As you know, we're on the Pacific Flyway, so the birds change with the season, and we just have a lot of birds come through our area. The Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society has a wonderful website with local, every month they publish local trips, self-guided trips. They tell you how to get there, what kind of birds you might see. And so it's a wonderful resource. There's also a Sequoia Audubon Society in San Mateo County. And nationally, the Cornell Lab of Ornithology is kind of the bird central for anything you want to know about birds. I like books, you know, real books, and use all three of these books to try to identify birds or to learn more about them at different times of the year. And then now, of course, there are wonderful apps, iBird Plus, Audubon, and Merlin. And Merlin now, if you hold your phone up and record a bird's song, Merlin will tell you what the bird is or make a good attempt. So there are really a lot of resources as we try to identify and understand the birds that we're looking at. People always ask me what camera I use, so I thought I'd put this into the slide, into the show. I can't carry out around a huge lens anymore, so I use a Sony RX10 #4, which is an all-in-one camera. So it goes from 24 to 600 millimeters, and it's really a wonderful walk-around camera and can help you get really close to the birds. So it's my go-to camera for everything except close-up photography. And of course, your phone, you know, is something you always have with you, and it's a great camera, although its zoom feature is not maybe as good as a, you know, as a real camera and a lens, a regular camera. So I've called the talk "Every Bird Has a Story" because birds do all kinds of interesting things that tell a story. So in their grooming, like this cute song sparrow that's taking a bath, in their hunting and eating, in their courting behavior, caring for their young, their physical characteristics, feathers are just really incredible. And the thing about still photography is it stops the motion and you can really see the feathers. The beaks are interesting. The colors, the feet, and then, you know, birds aren't funny, probably except to humans, but we project onto birds, and sometimes their behavior is really very amusing. And so I always look for the humor. As I say, it's a human projection, but it makes it fun looking at birds. So the first story is about ducks, dabblers and divers. So it refers to the two ways that birds eat. So this is a northern shoveler with that wonderful, huge shovel beak. And it is a dabbler, as you can see. It does put its head in the water, but it's trawling through the water with its beak to get its food. And there are many trawlers, dabblers, probably a very common one are these mallards, and you often see them with their little rear ends in the air. And so they do put their heads in the water, but they don't dive under the water. So these are called dabblers, and there are lots and lots of ducks that are dabblers. And then we have divers. So these are two buffleheads, the male and the female. They're really beautiful, beautiful birds. And they dive. And I was trying to capture a sequence, and I couldn't capture one sequence, but I did catch enough because they're fast. You know, birds are fast when they dive. When they decide to go for food, they go for it. So this is a composite. I put together 4 pictures of a female bufflehead, and you can see she kind of pushes down with her feet and gets her body a little more upright to give her more oomph going into the water. And then she pushes with her feet to get all the way under, and she, you know, they swim under the water. So you see these birds go down. Ruddy ducks do it. All the grebes do it. There are quite a few birds that really, you're looking at them and then all of a sudden they're not there anymore. Like, oh, where did it go? And then you have to wait for them to surface. So as I said, this is a female bufflehead. So it's interesting to see how they do that. The next story is the beak story. So we have 2 different kinds of beaks on 3 different birds. So the far left is a marbled godwit, which has a pinkish beak that's straight. And then we have 2 long-billed curlews with the beak curving down. And then we have a long-billed dowitcher, which is smaller than the godwit, but also has a straight beak. And then you've got avocets, which have a beak that curves up. So, you know, it's just how they evolved and how they get the food that they need. This avocet is in breeding plumage. So at this time of year, you'll see them, they're just black and white. But in the spring, you'll see them with the reddish, that rust colored neck and head. And then you have the color of the beak. So we have 2 egrets in our area, great egret and snowy egret. And the great egret is big. It has a yellow beak and black feet. And the snowy egret has yellow feet and a black beak. So they're just the reverse. So if you can see their heads and see the color of the beak, you can tell which they are. The snowy egrets are smaller and have fluffier feathers. But they're very common. You see them often if you go out around the bay. And then you have the shape of the beak. So this is a white-crowned sparrow, and you can see it eats seeds and things that it has to crack apart. So it has that thick beak. Whereas this flycatcher, a black phoebe, has a sharp pointed beak. They perch on something, a post or a tree, or this is a little building, and then they fly off, grab the insect, and then come back. So you often, black phoebes are very common. There are other flycatcher type birds that we have. The yellow-rumped warbler is another one that flies off and then comes back, which is if you're taking photographs, you just wait and hope that they come back if you miss it the first time. And then I had to include a hummingbird. This is Anna's hummingbirds stay here all winter. They're able to tolerate the cold. And I was just reading that they're starting to build their nests and prepare for eggs. So they get a jump on other hummingbirds because they're a little more cold tolerant, but that long beak obviously lets them drink from tubular flowers. So that's their adaptation. So the beaks can tell you a lot about the birds and help you identify them. This is a black skimmer, and this is actually also a beak story. Black skimmers come in the summertime, and they have a 2-colored beak, this kind of orange and black beak. But what's really distinctive, if we see them up close and you really look at that beak, you see that the top part is short and the bottom part is long, and which seems kind of awkward, right? But they use it to good advantage. they stick that longer beak in the water to scoop up their food. So it's very adaptive for the kind of food that they eat. And here's another close-up. You can see how they're dragging that in the water. And we were at Mountain View Slough, so the outside portion of where Shoreline Lake is, the part that's on the bay. And there were two black skimmers that just flew back and forth along the next to the land, and were feeding. For a while we thought it was just one, but it turns out we saw both of them at the same time. So we knew that there were two birds just flying back and forth. So one of the rules, or one of the lessons I've learned, is that you have to be out there. And you never know what you're going to see. We've seen it sometimes we don't see very much, but sometimes we see things that are really amazing. Well, that's the black skimmer story. Then we have the pied-billed grebe story. So pied means spotted or multicolored. And so it's because of that beak with the black spots on it. This is a male. Pied-billed grebes are very common. They stay here all year. Both the males and females raise the babies. This is a male, and he was swimming actually at Foothills Park in Boronda Lake. And we heard the sound first. It was kind of a whoop, whoop, whoop. And then we could see him making the sound. And you can see his throat's kind of puffed out. He's clearly telling other male pied-billed grebes, this is my territory, stay away, don't get near my female. So it's an early part of the territorial behavior and the courting behavior for the grebes. And there's a consequence to courting, of course, and that is babies. So this is at Emily Renzel Marsh. This was out in the middle of the South Pond. And you can see there's a baby grebe there. There's an eggshell. So this pair had built a nest on top of debris that was floating in the middle of the pond. And this was the parent and two babies. The parent would dive down, swim a little ways, and then pop back up with something in its mouth. And then the little babies would get their feet going and would swim over and have their meal. So it was really, really pretty exciting to see these babies. I think the babies are just adorable. This was last summer. This was also at Renzel Marsh, but in a different portion. And there were 4 babies. The one in the back never strayed from the nest while I was watching. The one in front was quite aggressive and swimming around, and so it got more food because it was out there. This is a sequence. So mom or dad brought some kind of a crayfish or something, and you'll see that the baby bird just swallows it whole, because of course birds don't have teeth. You've heard that expression, as scarce as hen's teeth. So they swallow these creatures whole and somehow deal with the bones and the shells that they can't, that they can't digest. But they swallow things whole. You'll see pictures in the slideshow of birds holding clam shells. And I've seen seagulls drop the shell to break it. But when you're just floating on the water, and that's where you live, you don't have anything hard to break it on. So they just swallow it whole. It's pretty amazing. And I love all those wiggly things on this poor little creature that's somebody's lunch. And then this was a few weeks later, I came back and here's a parent pied-billed grebe in front. And then one of the children has grown and it's as big as mom or dad, but it was still begging, but mom or dad wasn't doing any hunting for it. So it clearly had to be on its own, but it had trouble giving up having mom or dad feed it. We all know how that is. And it still has some of the coloring, but as you can see, it's as big as the parent. So that's kind of the last part of the story. The teenage grebe. So there are other babies. I think baby birds are just really cute. So this is an American coot, very common birds. Coots are everywhere in large numbers. So this one, they eat green plant material, and here's one feeding her baby. And if there's anything cuter than mallard babies, I'm not sure what it is. Here are 2 mallard babies. And then here's the whole family. Dad doesn't stick around, but mom over there on the right, and she was a little nervous. So she's leading her babies a little farther away into a not quite as open an area, but you know, there's always one. So you've got these 6 babies who are following mom, but the other one is either oblivious or just wants to get one last snack before going with mom. So, you know, there's one in every family that swims to a different drummer, right? And then this is the great horned owl. And I'd love to see the whole owl. It's that baby owl is so fuzzy, and mom probably is there, you know, keeping an eye out. This is in a huge tree at Rancho San Antonio, and they make their nest in kind of a hollow in the tree where the branches make a little area. And but they're very, as I said, they're very fuzzy. It's big, but definitely doesn't look like mom or dad. Then the Canada goose story. So some birders don't like Canada geese because they're bullies, they're loud, they're everywhere. Canada geese were once relatively migratory. They used to come down in the winter and then go back north. But they found it was so nice here with our golf courses and our schoolyards and all of our water that they stay here all year round. And they're very social, and they're big and they're loud. And one of the things I like about them is because they're big and they're not very afraid of people, you can get pretty close to them. So as a photographer, this was at a lake south of San Jose. And, you know, I love, you can see the feathers, you can see just how beautiful covering the Canada geese have. And as I said, I was able to get close. And they are noisy and bullies, and they defend these. They weren't particularly bothered by me, but they were bothered by people around them. And they were telling us, you know, stay away. And from their little brood of chicks, and here goslings. And here is when the goslings are young, they have yellow feathers and are quite fluffy. And then here's another family. The babies are a little older. They're starting to turn brown. And this family had 5 babies. I did see one family this is at Shoreline at Renzel Marsh. I saw a family with 13 babies. So that was quite a brood. I saw them a few weeks later and there were only 11. So, you know, there's a mortality rate. There are a lot of bird predators out there flying around. So 5 seemed like a much more manageable number than 13. But if you go out in March and April, you will go out to Shoreline, you will see several families of Canada geese. So it's really fun to see them. And then when they get a little older, they're getting even more brown. And the surprising thing about them is that they have huge feet. And it's kind of the golden retriever syndrome. You know, you get this cute puppy and then you notice how large the feet are. Well, it means they're going to grow into them. And Canada geese babies actually have really big feet because they're going to be big birds. And they are noisy. So I saw this pair. The one in back is clearly talking to the one in front, who was ignoring the one in back. And I'll let you decide which one you think is male and which one you think is female. I've noticed that people have different interpretations of this, of who is which. So I'll let you think about what you think the gender of each one is. But I thought it was really hilarious because that front one just didn't appear to have cared less, and the one behind was trying to get attention. And then this was one of the really weird things that we saw. There were two Canada geese on Shoreline Lake, and they were flapping around, and I assumed it was some kind of courting behavior. And then one of them flipped upside down. So this is a picture of this goose. I assume it was the male going, well, I'm the best because I can do this. And so I thought it was really quite funny with those feet in the air and its head, even though they are dabblers, they put their head in the water, but they don't dive. So to see one going under the water and turning over was really unusual. And they're beautiful flyers. They often fly in a group and you can hear them honking, but they're really lovely. They're really lovely birds. So they're, as I said, one of my favorites. So another story about, it's really two different sets of Forster's terns. These terns are common to our area. This is in winter or breeding or non-breeding plumage. So it just has black around the eye. And we were at the Sunnyvale waste treatment plant, which has quite an extensive area to walk. And we saw them diving, a group of about 12 of them diving into the water, and they zip down, and I didn't get any pictures of them going down, but of course you see the splash. And then this one is even swimming under the water. The wings are out, but it's under the water till it catches its little item and then pulls itself out. You can see that big splash with its tidbit, and then it flies off and then comes around again. So we watched these 12 for quite a while as they dove and got their food. So that was winter, not a year ago, but well, yeah, it was about a year ago that we saw these terns. And then these terns they're still Forster's terns, but they're in breeding plumage with that beautiful black head. And this is a composite as they hover before they dive down. And I just thought the wings are so graceful. They're just beautiful the way they fly and the way they hover. And then they splash down. Here you can just barely see this has got some little tidbit in its mouth, and they free themselves from the water and fly off. So they were making numerous rounds, and there were some young ones that they didn't look that different, but they were on the ground going, feed me, feed me. So it was really interesting to watch. Now, the pelican story, we have two kinds of pelicans. The white pelicans eat by dipping their beaks into the water. Those pouches fill with water and fish. And so they feed just on the water. And they often feed in groups because it gets their paddling and their splashing gets the fish moving, so it's easier for them to catch them. So here you can see the bird on the right has a fish in its pouch, and it runs its mouth under the water, catches the fish, and then to swallow it, it lifts its head straight up to swallow. Again, remember, these birds don't have teeth, so they swallow them whole. And I was thinking, how is their throat big enough? But that's the way they eat. And then the one on the left had just fed, and it's draining the water out of its mouth. So it's really interesting to watch white pelicans feed on the water. And of course, they're beautiful flyers. And they also fly in groups. And then there's the brown pelican. So brown pelicans are basically the same shape as the white ones. I love the reflection on this one. And they land and take off from the water. This one I think is landing. But they hunt from the sky. So this one is starting to hover. And then it spots something in the water. So you figure their eyes are pretty good. And it just heads straight down. I mean, they really go in a big rush. So I have a 5-photo series of a dive. So here it's getting ready. It's already starting to fold its wings, coming down farther, farther. So it's really folding its wings, and then it goes into, then it collapses its wings, goes into the water, and grabs its food. So I think I'll go back. I'll go back through that because it's really neat if you do it kind of fast. Makes it more like a video. Down, 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 down. So it's just interesting. And I know if you're at the coast and see huge flocks of brown pelicans, they are just diving all over the place. So I can commend that to you. So the pelicans. Now, these are different grebes. The Clark's and Western grebes have that longer neck. They have a red eye. They have white on a part of the neck. And Clark's grebe, the eye is in white feathers. And for the Western grebe, the eye is in black feathers. But the interesting thing is that they interbreed. And so sometimes it's a little tricky to tell which grebe it is. So these are pictures from Calero Reservoir. The Western grebes and Clark's grebes come in March and April, and they have very interesting courting behavior. So here they're doing parallel motion. If you're old enough, you might remember that Disney used to have True Life Adventures, and they made a big deal about the grebes courting because they do something funny, which I will show you. So here they're doing parallel. Here they're kind of talking to each other, interrelating, and here they're even closer. I kind of like the heart shape that it made. And when they've done enough of that, they get up, they stretch their necks up, and they put their feet down, and their feet are going a mile a minute, and they're up off the water or on the water. And if you look at the eyes, I think the one on the right is the Clark's grebe, but the one on the left, you know, there's some black feathers and some white feathers. So which one it is, I couldn't tell you. They do this dance moving across the water for like 5 or 6 seconds. So it's a long, they have to work hard to keep up like that. But as I said, it's part of their courting behavior. So it's really very, very interesting. I did have to sit there for an hour. When I got to Calero Reservoir, they were all sleeping. So I had to wait until they woke up and got amorous before I could get any pictures. So acorn woodpeckers are also common because we have so many oak trees, and they're really very distinctive looking. You can see with that white eye, the black center, and then the black and white feathers and the red feathers on top. They love acorns. Here, this one is grabbed an acorn, and what do they do with them? They put them into a tree. So they use their beaks, and their heads are protected so that when they pound with their beaks, it doesn't damage their brains. They make these holes and they put the acorns in them. This tree is called a granary because it holds, obviously, lots of acorns, too much for one bird or even one family. So several families put the acorns in and guard it because clearly other animals would love to have these acorns, squirrels and other birds. So but here is one putting an acorn in a hole. So if you look at large oak trees, you can sometimes see either the holes filled like this one or a lot of empty holes. And then this is the one that got away story. So as a photographer of birds, flowers move in the wind, but they don't move from place to place. Sometimes the birds pose for you and sometimes they don't. So this is my friend Carl Gold who took this eagle picture, bald eagle picture, and sent it to me. And he told me he'd seen it at Grant Lake, which is in Grant Ranch County Park in Santa Clara County. It's about halfway up the road to Mount Hamilton. But I thought, well, I don't have a bald eagle picture at this time. And so I'll go and see if I can get a capture. So I drove up there and I got to the lake and I could see with my binoculars at the end of the lake that there was a bald eagle up in a tree. And so I'm hopeful. I trot over there and just the rule is that you take you take a photo when you can get a photo and then you try to get a better photo. So I'm going to take my first photo. I'm not too close, but I put the camera up to my face. I put my finger on the shutter button, and this is what I get. So the eagle is flying away. So it definitely was the bird that flew away, that got away. However, there is a good sequel to the story in that in June, I was able to go up to Puget Sound and to Hood Canal, which is a part of the sound, to photograph bald eagles and great blue herons and other birds. And so in the background, you see the Olympic Mountains and these beautiful, majestic birds. And there's a creek coming in, and there are oyster beds. And when the tide goes out, you see that the oyster beds are exposed, and the fish that were in the open water are suddenly caught as the tide went out. So they're still in water, but they can't swim away. And so every day when the tide goes out, I think about 12 bald eagles, and I counted 40 great blue herons had come fish. So, and this is a juvenile bald eagle. Bald eagles don't get their white head until they're 4 or 5 years old. You can see he's got a fish, and this heron is not happy. So they're kind of communicating with each other. And then you have the juveniles also fight each other. And you see those huge talons on their feet. It's pretty, not something you'd want landing on you just bare, would you? And this is not a composite. They were in this relationship here. And we just watched them fly back and forth for like 3 hours, carrying the fish. Most of the fish were called midshipmen. They're fairly good sized fish. So we saw lots of eagles. And then the great blues, this one is coming in for a landing. And to me, it looked like a model coming on the runway with those hips kind of askew. And they are beautiful. They're big birds and they're beautiful. Here's another one coming in for a landing with the reflection. And then they were also fishing in the shallow water. So they get their prey by stabbing them with that long beak. And then they kind of drop it in the water. I don't know whether it's to get it a little wetter or to get it in so that it's obviously it can't swallow it while it's impaled on the beak. So they have to kind of arrange it by dropping it in the water and picking up again. And then they swallow, and again, swallowing it whole at first. And here it is with after it's swallowed, so you can see there's something large there in the gullet. So I thought that was, really funny to see it filled with a fish-shaped fish in its mouth, in its gullet. So I'm going to show you the slideshow. I'm using music that is fair use music. So I did pay for the right to have this recorded and put out. And it's a short piece, so I used it twice, and there's a little break in the sound between the first one and the second one. So don't worry when the music fades out and there's a little time period with no music. So sit back and take a deep breath. And imagine you are out on a trail near the water or among the trees, and you feel the fresh air and the soft breeze, and relax and enjoy. Sorry about the phone. That's a shot. Okay. So, Kat, if we can open up the, so people can ask questions, live,
Yeah,
would be-
everyone can feel
that
free
would be
to.
great. And, but I'll start with the chat. Um, so how did I get the pictures of the pinebill grebe babies? Was I in a kayak? No, I just have a long lens. Um, they weren't too far away. You know, Emily Renzel Marsh is not a huge area. And they clearly felt protected enough so they didn't, some birds you get close to the edge and they just swim away, which is frustrating. And you get those famous butt shots, but sometimes they don't. So thank you. Thanks very much. And you know, the question about the male and female Canada geese, I can't tell them apart. If the male is supposed to be bigger, but unless they're right next to each other, you know, they look pretty big. So I don't know whether I actually don't know the answer. If somebody knows if the male swims in the back to be more protective, that would be good to know. I don't know the answer to that. Oh, the camera I use is I showed it in the beginning. It's the Sony RX10. It's an all-in-one, so I don't have to change lenses on it. It has the same sensor size as the Nikon that I used to use, so it wasn't a step down in quality. The photos are a little, well, you have to have your ISO high when you take birds and they're moving. So you can get a fast shutter speed. So the photos are noisy, and I use Topaz Denoise AI, which is a wonderful denoising software, which is a plugin that goes with various pieces of software, and it's really wonderful for taking care of noise. But I love my Sony RX10. It's easy to carry, and it pretty much does the job except for close-up photography. Okay. Yeah. Oh, I'd love to get a burrowing owl. So thank you, Adelaide. Adelaide sent it to me. She lives in Redwood Shores and has her morning walk on the levee. And I would love to get a picture of some burrowing owls. So maybe I should arrange to come up there. How near are you? Well, you just do the best you can. That's all I can say. And I do crop. I like intimacy in my photos, so I crop. And if I have to crop too much, I can enlarge them. As I said, I think if you had a phone, you wouldn't be able really to zoom in enough. Having a long lens is really helpful to getting close-ups of birds. And some birds are really shy, and some birds are, you know, don't care that much, particularly in some of the common places where I go. There are a lot of people that go there. And so the birds are not as scared as, and water birds are easier to take pictures of than birds in the trees. Tree birds are shyer. They can hide in those branches, and they're generally farther away. I don't use a tripod. So question about a tripod. I don't actually use a tripod at all for my bird shots. It would be very hampering. You never know what birds are going to do. You're never, you know, if I have seen a wildlife photographer move his tripod, and I suppose if you did it a lot, you would be good at it. But when I'm looking around, first of all, you have to have a fast shutter speed to capture the movement of the bird. And so the purpose of having a tripod is to be able to have a slow shutter speed, so you don't have so much noise. So I don't use a tripod at all, unless it's sunrise or sunset, or landscape that's going to be still for a long period of time. Okay, shutter speed. So my settings, I usually take it as f7.1, which is a pretty open shutter. I set my ISO for 640 and, a 1,000th of a second, particularly when so it's a 600 millimeter zoom. So just to get a sharp picture of a still, something that's still, I would need 1/600th of a second. So 1,000, 12/50th of a second. And the thing is, with digital cameras, you can try something out and have a look at the picture, see if you got it sharp by enlarging. And then if it wasn't fast enough, you need to increase the shutter speed, which means either having a more open aperture or a higher ISO. I generally increase the ISO to get a faster shutter speed. So those are generally. I also use a setting which lets me take a series of shots, goes tick, 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 tick. And to get the brown pelican diving, I went out to Shoreline 3 different times to try to get that series. And I finally increased the speed at which it captured the photos. So instead of taking a photo, tick, 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 it went tick, 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 tick. That was the only way I could get enough individual, stopping the action, enough individual shots. Okay, great. Thank you, Adelaide. Are there any other, you're welcome to ask verbal questions too. Do we have, yeah.
So Judy, I was
Yes.
just wondering, what season of the year are those grebes mating?
The grebes, it's all in the spring. So March, April, May
Okay,
is pretty much when you see. So the, yeah. Well, it
Okay.
might have been May, June, July. It might have been a little later. If you're looking, it changes every time you go out, actually. Sometimes it doesn't change very much, but I think it was Woody Allen said that 95% of life is showing up. Definitely 95% of photography is nature photography. You have to be out there. So just go out and see what you see. I don't know if you noticed in the slideshow, the double-crested cormorant, there was a shot of them all streaming across the water.
Mhm.
And we were out there and we noticed this huge cluster of cormorants, and it was a feeding frenzy. They were just sweeping across the water to get to this one section that must have had a lot of fish. And, only seen it once. Only seen that Canada goose with its feet in the air once. So, but spring into summer is when you see the babies. I think the Canada goose are like March and April, or April and May. But I encourage you just never know what you're going to see when you go out there, which is part of the fun. Any other questions? Well, let's see, we've got a few more things. Yeah, that's another, am I panning the camera for flight shots? Of course, I have. So there is a style of photography where you set you have your camera still and the bird flies by and it's kind of blurred. But these, so there's a feature that my camera has that lets me, if I can get the bird in focus, it will stay in focus even when it's moving and changing its distance from me. So that's another thing that helps. So, it's up in the sky. I try to get the camera to focus. Sometimes that's a challenge. Another advantage of large birds. And then I just keep moving the camera and the focus stays correct. And then I take a series of shots. Did that? do I use filters? I just have a UV protection filter on my camera. So if I scrape it, it's only the loss of the filter, not the camera, not the lens. So anything, I mean, in the old film days, you used filters to get certain kinds of colors to be brighter. But you can do all that in software, so I don't bother with that. And certainly polarizing filters, when you're at a different angle to the sun, the polarizing effect is different. So I wouldn't want to have that be affecting. So I don't use any filters either. Color, nuclear density wouldn't be good because that would make it darker, which I definitely don't want. You want it to be as bright as possible so you can take it as fast as you can. So any other, just raise your hand or put up your little hand.
Or
See,
you can speak to anyone can unmute and ask any questions they have.
right,
I have a question.
yes,
Can you hear me?
I
Yes.
can, yes.
Okay, this is a small bird that comes into my backyard and it has a black capped head and a gray body. It's a very pretty little thing, but it doesn't, it probably is like a sparrow, but it doesn't look like the sparrows I'm used to.
Is it a chickadee?
Right?
There are chestnut back chickadees that have, or it could be a junco, a black, used to be called an Oregon junco, and I now think it's called a black eyed junco. Anyway, that's,
Yeah,
yeah,
black
it's a
head
pretty
and-
small bird.
very cute bird. Yeah.
Well, I encourage you to, you could take a picture of it and send it to iNaturalist.
Uh-huh.
Just take a picture with your phone. Or look in a book. I think books are very helpful.
Mhm.
And you just, if you have a sense of what it might be, you don't have to go through the whole book. Well, it's a small bird, so it's not a water bird, so you can eliminate all the ducks and the
Right.
egrets and all those things.
I came from the East Coast and the birds are the different birds out here than what we had in the East Coast. but-
Oh, yes, some are the same, but many are different.
Right.
So like we have chestnut back chickadees instead of black cap chickadees. We
Yeah.
have oak titmice and not
Oh,
tufted titmouse. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's very true.
Interesting, yeah.
Any other questions that I could help with? Well, I really appreciate you all coming and it's a treat for me to share my photography with you. And if you have any more questions, okay. I got. So thank you. I really appreciate everybody coming. Have a good
Thank
day. And
you.
as I said, the
Thank
trick to
you.
seeing birds is going out,
Mhm.
looking around. I mean, you can have a bird feeder and that's great. That attracts some birds,
Mhm.
but certainly not the water birds. Water birds are easier to see because there's no branches around. So go out to the bay and lots of places to walk. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
so
It's
much.
a wonderful
welcome.
presentation.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Judy.
And I love to do these presentations. So if you have a group you'd like me to speak to, I'm always happy to do that.
Good,
Oh, perfect.
good.
All right, everyone, have a good day. Like I said, we will be sending this recording out later this week, so you can share it with anyone that you like.
Okay, great.
Thanks for coming.
No, I'm just gonna leave and then I'll leave.
Okay.